Welcome back, everyone. We hope all of you are refreshed and energized for our next panel discussion on the topic Innovating for Tomorrow, Harnessing Technology's Creative Power. In today's rapidly changing world, innovation is more important than ever. It is essential for businesses to stay connected, for governments to address the challenges of the 21st century, and for individuals to thrive in an ever-evolving world. Technology is a powerful tool for innovation, and it can be used to automate tasks, collect and analyze data, and create new products and services. Like I mentioned, we now move into a panel discussion on the topic Innovating for Tomorrow, Harnessing Technology's Creative Power. Moderating this session is Namratha Dharshan, Chief Business Leader, India Research Information Services Group. Please give her a big round of applause as I invite her onto the stage. Namratha has 18 years of extensive research experience in digital transformation, omni-channel, analytics, AI, and automation. She is the Chief Business Leader for India Research and co-lead on ISG Index. The speakers joining her for this discussion, starting with Vineet Dwivedi, Global Head, Alcon Global Services. Vineet is a global leader with vast experience in business transformation. Currently, he is the Global Head for Alcon Global Services and Head of AGS India. Joining them on the panel is Dr. Ganesh, Chief Product Officer, Vice President and General Manager, HARMAN Digital Transformation Solutions, an award-winning digital transformation and innovation leader with expertise in leading technology, strategy, organizational innovation, research, and development. Recognized in the industry as an innovator with a proven track record of converting new technology ideas into successful business opportunities. And last but not least, we have with us Srinivas Iyengar, Vice President and Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences, Happiest Minds Technologies. Srinivas has been in information technology space for over 25 years, managing businesses across Europe, USA, and India. Currently working for Happiest Minds as Vice President and Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences Vertical, Srini has been recognized as one of the top 50 global thought leaders and influencers on health tech by a leading global platform. Please give them a big round of applause once again. And having said that, Namratha, over to you.
Right. Very good afternoon to our panelists here, and a very good afternoon to the audience as well. So, just before we begin, a quick theme on what exactly are we going to discuss as far as today's panel is concerned, right? So, it's rapidly changing. I mean, today's fast-paced world, organizations are required to reinvent, rethink, revisit how they're actually operating itself. I mean, as cliched as it may sound, but just think about, 2 years back what pandemic did to all of us. It's incredible, and some of the changes that have taken place is really an irreversible phenomenon. So given all the changes, the fast-paced world that we are living in, organizations, in order to sort of succeed, stay relevant, stay ahead of competition, they're actually on a path of continuous innovation. They need to have like an agile mindset to sort of embrace, all the changes, and most importantly, an appetite to accept the newer technologies and implement them. As the third largest tech startup ecosystem in the world, and more than 260,000 patents filed in the last decade, and after successfully landing on the moon, obviously India is at the heart of innovation. On that note, without much further delays, let me start off with our panel discussions. We're not only discussing about tech innovation, best practices, but certainly how India as our nation playing a pivotal role in shaping a lot of the organization's growth story. So with that, Jay, let me focus on you first. And your prime focus has largely been in the technology space, and technology with its true potential, how much it can touch millions of lives is just incredible in today's age. And there's also been a lot of focus, particularly for you, on the emerging tech. So my question to you is that, how do you see what the future really holds for us in terms of tech adoption? Or, in maybe NASSCOM's language, what is the future through tech lens? And how is India particularly playing a pivotal role in shaping the technology landscape with a global impact?
Thanks for having me on this panel. And one of the interesting things we are seeing as far as the technology evolution is concerned, and I explored this as part of my PhD thesis as well, is the pace of change, right? So the pace of change of technology is getting exponential from a growth point of view, right? So if you look at some of the traditional industries, right, typically the older manufacturing, not the newer ones, they took decades to change direction, to adopt new technologies, to bring about fundamental change in the products, the processes, etc. Many of these companies used to work on 5-year, 6-year, 10-year horizons before they could come out with a new product or a new process innovation, right? That pace of change is drastically, getting shorter, right? There are startups, and then there are, medium-sized companies where complete business models are changing overnight, right? Some of the newer developments around generative AI is a good example to talk about in terms of the last 8 months or 9 months. The technology, the entire AI, ecosystem plus Gen AI specifically, it's taken everybody by storm, right? And this is the pace of change we are encountering, right? Typically, if you look at the cloud, the related technologies like the IoT, etc., the pace of change is getting faster and faster. And the interesting thing we are also seeing with some of these technologies is that it is not just the technology innovations which are changing, but also the pace of adoption is changing. Because traditionally, enterprises were skeptical about adopting some of these emerging technologies, right? Things are changing extremely fast. For example, the COVID-imposed conditions essentially forced many companies to become cloud first from cloud skeptics overnight, right? Because they had no choice. And now things like Gen AI is being on the conversation table of every single CIO, right? And they're all experimenting with a lot of these technologies. One personal anecdote I can give you is, I wrote my first AI program back in 1998, where there was this technology called expert systems, right? So you write hundreds of if-then-else rules, and then essentially you make a decision regarding an outcome. Today we call it business rules, right? Rules engines. Today we are calling transformers and deep learning as the cutting edge. 20 years down the line, you can imagine how that generation is going to look at today's technology. So things are moving fast, and happy to be part of this revolution, and being in India, and all the innovations, all the startups, the mid-sized companies, the larger companies, NASSCOM, the ecosystem, and the government playing a very, very important role. We are in for very, very interesting times in our careers.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Srinivas, you've spent a significant time in the healthcare vertical itself. We are keen to hear some of your experiences in terms of the tech penetration into this vertical. In addition, I think the other piece is that healthcare in general is a very highly regulated vertical too. So how easy or difficult, or some of the challenges that you have faced as far as the tech adoption is concerned? Interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Thanks, Namratha. So I'll pick a couple of use cases, and I'll also talk about challenges. So we, first one is a research platform that we are working on today. And second one is a digital surgery platform. So digital surgery platform is unique. So when world is moving towards cloud computing, there are two places or two areas in this world where you don't want cloud computing or internet, right? One is a surgical equipment in an operation theater, and second one is a driverless car. So technically, you can sit in the back seat, there's no steering, and you're going, and in the middle of the drive, you get to see a truck coming opposite direction, and your car says, I'm running low of bandwidth, right? It's a similar situation in an operation theater too. So you don't want those equipments to be a connected equipment or dependent on cloud computing. So the other one is the research program that we have embarked into. So there are 3 areas where we are today technology partners for large research programs. The first one is on neurological disorders. Second one on gut microbiome and brain linkage. And the third one is on stroke. Pretty interesting areas, very large programs that we have embarked into. So let's look at the neurological disorders. One is Parkinson's, where we have a cohort of 10,000 plus people, and we have put them into different studies. We are collecting clinical ontological information. We are collecting patient-generated health data. We are also collecting social determinants of a person, right? Because a person could technically be getting Parkinson's because he's living in a city which is highly polluted, right? That could also be a cause for Parkinson's. So we have to collect all this data, this humongous amount of data that we're collecting. And when we put them into different studies, every quarter we also collect their brain scans, right? Each scan will generate about 1,500 images, each 1 MB each, so 1.5 GB. In a year, we'll correct 6 GB per person at the minimum 10,000 cohorts, 60 terabytes. 2-3 years, 35,000 cohort members. Look at the amount of data. Just the image data itself will be few hundred terabytes. And you have to use that for computing with the other information that we have collected for a patient, right? It is humanly not possible. So technology has to be there for finding a solution to these disorders that we are looking at to solve now, currently. And today's high-performance computers are also not possible to use. So like how we heard in the two previous discussions here, quantum computing is extremely, extremely important. So we have kind of figured out that we have to use quantum computing. We have to use quantum image processing. And we have to take the image through the quantum superposition and make sure we have to have quantum entanglement for higher security thing that we have to have. So this is the kind of complexities that we are looking at. Now, I don't want to explain you what complexities that we have here today, right? First of all, we have to make people understand what quantum computing is all about. We have to figure out where the quantum infrastructure is, and we have to figure out the technologists, engineers, and domain people who will come and fix all these things for us. Otherwise, there's no way we can find solution to neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. So these are some of the issues that we have. When it comes to digital surgery platforms, hospitals are completely ours to have the surgical equipments connected to internet. They say you can bring in a USB, plug it in, and take the data, because post-op we have to do a lot of analysis on this data. So we are trying to convince our partners to take data to the quantum, because it's outside our network. We cannot have quantum computers within our network. And at the same time, we have to tell hospitals that we have to have these machines connected at some point of time. So there is a lot of discussion and debates that happen. So these are some of the challenges that we face. Thank you.
Thank you. But just imagining the potential impact and how much of proactive diagnosis it can have is just incredible at this stage, I mean, in the healthcare field.
It is. With the way things can go wrong with a human brain, it's a miracle that we are all here. So.
All right. Thanks, Srinivas. Vineet, at Alcon Global Services, I mean, of course, in line with healthcare, but you are specifically focused on eye care, right? And we were having some conversations on how it can, technology itself can revolutionize or redefine the whole eye care piece. Very much interested on how the technology penetration is happening within your space and the impact that it is creating.
Thank you, Namratha. And Srini, I think you mentioned a very good point on how digital surgeries are still not the thing in or preferred. So maybe let me just paint a picture about how we see the problem which is going to come in next 25 years. And these are WHO numbers that by 2050, 50% of the world population will have eye issues. At least one of those issues, either farsightedness or nearsightedness, myopia, presbyopia, you name anything. 50% of the world population. And these numbers were before COVID. And all of us know what COVID has done. Even the small kids, they have so much of exposure to digital via media. So look at how much the problem is going to be there. And are we ready as world to solve that problem? And I think that's where the number of doctors or eye care health professionals required would be humongous. So there is no way that you can have that so easily done. And that's where, in fact, there are a lot of work happening on how can we use technology. Even I think some countries already using robots-assisted cataract surgeries, because cataract is one thing. With your age, whether we like it or not, there is a probability that we get into a cataract, because this is an aging-related issue. So what we are doing, keeping that in mind, that how do we really help people see brilliantly? I think that is the main purpose. There is so much of requirement gonna come, who will help us? In Alcon, we have been innovating for 75 years. So what we are working now, looking at the full ecosystem. How can we increase efficiency and effectiveness of our doctors so that doctors can do more surgery? One is to bring more doctors. Second is they can do. So in a day, if a doctor is doing 20, 25 surgeries, how can we make this number go up? So we are partnering with a lot of our very experienced doctors across the globe, wherein we are looking at how can we increase that. So I'll give you a very quick example. There is a doctor who is starting the practice versus a doctor who has 20, 30 years of practice. Both do the same surgery. The way, Srini, you mentioned about technology, if as an individual, I have to take my parents or my seniors for the surgery, where would you like to choose? More experience, first-time doctor. So how do we reduce doctor-to-doctor variation? So there is a lot of work. How can we use technology? So imagine if you have to draw, let's say, 30 circles on a piece of paper. Can you draw exactly, it's the same paper, same person. Can we draw that? There will be variation, right? Same way, when doctors have to do the insertion, take out the lens, put the lens, how variation can inject and which will eventually impact patient. So there are some technologies which we have, which are like LensX, some of our products which we have worked on, which will help to reduce that variation. So a doctor can do that work faster. So the patient is not having post-operation issues. That is one example. Second is, how do we really help not only the doctors, the whole ecosystem? Because it's about our eye care taker, the whole system, the nurses, the staff which is working in operation theater. So if a cataract surgery, I'll take the same example, is taking 15 minutes for now for a doctor to come, how can that be done in 7 minutes or 8 minutes with a better quality? So I think those are the technologies which we are already working. So there are products which we have already launched in market in some of our areas, wherein the data, when you go for your eye checkup, the moment your diagnostic is done, same data can flow into the different suit, wherein it can even prescribe what lens you will require. So the system, the technology is telling the doctor after the diagnostic, and then the doctor will do the OT. After operations, again you go back to the checking, and it will also tell whether it was corrected, whatever was prescribed or not. If not, then what correction or what remedy which doctor has to do. All this happening through one of the platform which we are working on, everything integrated. And then we go one layer down. How do we make sure the supply chain is available? Because we saw in the COVID, everything. So doctor is ready, patient is ready, but lens is not there. Then how will this work? So we are integrating the whole supply, this information which lens is required comes to our Alcon system, our supply chain is able to react. So integrating the whole technology together to make sure our patients, our customers, and our Alcon systems, this golden triangle can really work together. So that's how I would summarize Namratha.
Thank you. The stat about digital exposure with kids, I'm sure everybody in the audience, at least all the parents, can definitely relate to that. Thank you very much. So we spoke a lot about tech innovation. I mean, fascinating use cases, and we know what really the future looks like, and how connected everything is. I mean, one thing I definitely want is, when I call up any of the call centers, is I don't want them to ask my name. So it starts from there, and then the whole experience itself impacting the entire value chain. Having said, we spoke about the tech innovation, but innovation itself is not complete until we speak about the skill sets and talent. So on that note, Vineet, I'll stay with you on this one. Right? You did mention about 75% of your global capability workforce in India. So one is, how are you kind of hiring, training, learning and development, which is absolutely essential in today's world? What are some of the best practices that you're following? And the most important other thing is India, for your company, how is that kind of posing as a talent hub, and how is that sort of enabling your company's growth as well?
Sure. Thank you, Namratha. So if I look at, maybe I'll go with the first part. Alcon Global Services is fairly new as a capability center which we have developed for Alcon 4.5 years ago. I was the second employee to join in, and now we have around 1,200 people in India. I think one of the big focus which we have, Alcon as a IT or a tech company was not known, and even still we are very humble. We are not that known. But how do we have to bring if a digital or technology talent in Alcon so they can stay and also innovate with us? So one thing which we do consciously is connect our talent with the purpose, because that's the retention or the part which you see. So imagine when you join on day one, if you have a dark room wherein our new employee can go and experience how does it feel when you are not able to see. And then when you understand this is an impact which you are going to make while you work in Alcon. Or similarly, if I am working in finance or I am working in IT, working on a software developer or a MuleSoft engineer, but can I really understand this application which I am going to work? How will this change the life of that? So that is one thing. And we are also working a lot on our middle management development programs. Because what I see from a GCC perspective, while we are going to see a lot of global leaders growing from India, I think India is really shining, if I can say. How do we really make sure our next lines are really ready for it? Are they able to take up the challenge? So I think when it comes to the energy, excitement, knowledge, absolutely we are there. But how do we really make sure that they are able to handle those complex situations, complex, entangled problems on the change management side as well? Can they handle big transformation? So I think a lot of effort which we are trying to put it there. Going to the second part of your question, what we are doing, I'll give a couple of examples, how India is creating an impact. And as I said, we are only 4.5 years old. Within a very short span of time, Alcon is a 75-year-old company. We have all the research and development labs in the US. This was the first time in Alcon history they have opened a R&D lab in our India, which is in our Global Capability Center. And what we are doing, I'll take a cue from Srini. He mentioned about if you are in a surgery, your system cannot do for a reboot or anything. Imagine you are doing a surgery and if everything has to restart, cannot happen, should not happen. So in the lab which we have established, our engineers from India, they are developing softwares, they are testing, doing the verification, validation, reliability test of those. So when all these IoT or the things working together, there cannot be any disruption. So that capability is being developed in India, tested in India, and we are continuing to do more and more. Second example, on the e-commerce side, I think everybody knows how B2C market is really doing well, but in our products, we are in B2B as well. That's where there was a white space, and we have worked from our India team, our digital health, we call that as a digital health. One of our franchises is surgical, where these cataract, phaco, LASIK machines we are working. The team worked together from India with our vendor partners here, co-located, very well done. Within a record time of 15 weeks, they were able to develop a product, launch in the market, and that has been very successfully accepted in US and UK, which are one of the biggest consumer market for us. So that's how I see how our engineers, our people are able to create a big impact from India. I see from Alcon perspective, if I talk about, we are around 75 to 80% of our capabilities are sitting in India. So we have stopped counting the head count now. We say it's a skill count which matters. How much skill as a capability in India we can bring on the table. And not one thing which we have established very clearly in our organization, we are not thinking about cost. Yes, that is given. But how do we look at the leadership bench strength? So I'm happy to share in 4 years, all my leadership team in India, either most of them are reporting to our executive level -1 or -2. Everybody has moved up. I think that's where it is important that how our India is moving forward, our capabilities, not only on the tech side, tech plus leadership together is growing, having seat on the table, voice on the table, and influence on the table. I think that's where we are working consciously to upgrade their skill. Sorry, long answer.
No, absolutely. No, those are brilliant points, because one of the key things that our research also indicates is that out of all a few GCCs that we did survey, only 10% of those GCCs really think that, the GCC capabilities are innovation centers as opposed to cost optimization centers. It still is, but then, that's kind of slowly transforming. And the centers in India growing to be R&D centers is a fantastic example for, a lot of the people to take away that how these transformations are also happening. So thank you so much for that, Vineet. Shini, I'll probably come to you next. I have to bring in a little bit of my research background. So one of the research points actually indicate that the top three, one of the top three challenges in the healthcare space, transformation challenges, is the availability of skills. So how do you see that impacting your vertical? And within your own organizations, how are you looking at nurturing the talent for this particular vertical space?
Sure, I'll surely answer that. But before that, I just wanted to add on a couple of things to what Vineet said. So when we were working with hospitals on their surgical platforms, and since they were not ready for using cloud computing, we've kind of started moving into more edge computing-based augmented intelligence systems, which can interact with the doctors at the time of surgical procedure. Those are some of the things that we can look at for future. So when it comes to skills, so very interesting area. Let's go back 8-9 years to 2015, when Python and Anaconda were still snakes in India, right? So I'm sure you all know that. So I was in Paris in a tech event, and one of the main billboards that I saw was a Chinese guy holding a human brain scan picture. So I called my friend and said, hey, what's happening, man? I can see healthcare being talked in technology events, which was not seen in those days. So then he said, Srini, it's because of two things. One, it is because of emerging tech. And second one, China is a front runner in AI supremacy, and they're leading the race today. So then I came back to India, started reading more on emerging tech. And after 6 months, I called my friend and I said, hey, I've read more about emerging tech. Then he said, Srini, you're too late. That has been now renamed as emerging deep tech. So I was like, then I went back and started reading what emerging deep tech was all about. I started reading about what CNN, convolutive neural networks was KNN, key nearest neighbor, what is RNN, and how these things are being used in healthcare, and what kind of algorithms that we can build, and so on and so forth. And I felt very enriched and a lot of knowledge on these things. Just then, in 2016, I was on stage talking to about 200 plus techies. And I was very proud of my knowledge on CNNs, KNN, and RNNs, right? So I asked them a question. How many of you know CNN? To my surprise and shock, each one of them raised their hands. I was so ashamed of myself that I'm the only one who did not know about it. But that lived only for 5 seconds, 10 seconds, because I asked them a question. Can one of you explain what CNN is all about? So then he said, sir, it's a news channel. I was like, no, there's one more meaning to CNN. So many of them put their hands down, and there were 5 or 6 who still had their hands up. And I asked them, what is CNN? He said, yes, sir, the other meaning is Trump calls it as Clinton News Network. That's about it. So that is when I realized why India is not even in a AI race, and we were not even in top 20 at that point of time. And smaller countries were making a kill out of it, both in terms of number of startups, universities picking up AI, and quite a lot of things. So at that point of time, I started talking to NASSCOM, and we went to a few colleges, taking NASSCOM's future skills as a platform to make sure we go to the grassroots and try to do something. And even in the office, we started building a lot of upskilling and reskilling programs so that we can take our employees, train them into learning emerging deep tech so that they could be a part of the overall journey that we were having. So that's when I was part of Dayanand Sagar University. I'm a professor in Dayanand Sagar University today. And there we have emerging tech and emerging deep tech as a part of engineering curriculum. It's not only part of engineering curriculum, it's a part of undergrad curriculum as well. And we have also brought in even quantum computing for MBAs and executive MBAs, because we not only want engineers, we want even the people who do the think tank on how can we really build quantum or edge computing, the managers also to understand technology very well. Thank you.
No, fantastic. Thank you so much. I think what's really important is, when we can actually influence the underlying syllabus. But going back to what I mentioned in my introduction is the rapid changes happening also requires some changes to our fundamentals in terms of how we are approaching learning and development, and just to see organizations like yours to be able to influence, and of course NASSCOM to influence the future skill sets is brilliant. And while we're sticking to the skill set, Jay, you do, like I said, a lot of research, and you already touched upon the topic of Gen AI. So with this, technology just making inroads so rapidly. I mean, 10 months back, nobody even spoke about it, but today, I think it's part and parcel of every discussion. What kind of new skill sets should organizations be prepared for? What kind of shift is happening in the whole skill set domain? And of course, anything that the academic institutions can also take back.
So from a skill sets point of view, the fundamentals of learning are not changing, right? It's just that the pace of change is so fast, right? It is difficult for many people to keep up to date with all the changes happening, right? So the number of programming languages, the number of technology interventions coming up, that's exploding, and that is going to continue for the foreseeable future. Things are not going to become stable ever, right? If things are stable, then there is something wrong with the world, right? So the fundamentals in terms of the skills you want to impart to the employees or the students in campuses, these are things like problem-solving skills, analytical skills, right? Ability to work in groups, right, effectively, right? And most importantly, there are these soft skills which typically we tend to ignore, assuming that a lot of the people are fairly comfortable on the many of the softer aspects of technology. I think those are things we need to look at. So the fundamentals are not changing. I'll give you a good example about soft skills in terms of if there is people all talk about algorithm bias and data bias and all the other things, right? So an algorithm bias is nothing but a human bias, which is manifested in the form of an algorithm which a human being or a group of people wrote, right? It is not as if the algorithm is learned a bias on its own, right? So along with all the learning, analytical, problem-solving skills, we need to also look at how does the next generation learn some of the biases which can creep into the products we are building, the decisions we are making, right? So we all have heard about all the algorithmic biases which have essentially discriminated against certain set of people, certain races, certain genders, etc. Right? These have had significant impact, and we can see all the regulations coming up across the world. All the more reason for us to train the employees on these biases, right? So which is very, very critical, and we need to put in not just the training in place, but also the checks and balances and the guardrails for these biases coming in many of these algorithms, right? So there was this recent study from Stanford and a few other universities where they looked at a number of ground truth data sets we all use, like the ImageNet and various other data sets. When they started, and which we take as gospel truth when we are building algorithms of the type CNN, for example, but they looked at this data set and found that many of these data sets tagging, fundamental ground truth tagging is wrong, right? So these are things we need to impart, question not just the algorithm, but also right at the ground truth data level, right? So these are things we need to look at going forward very, very carefully.
Thanks, Jay. No, that's really important. I think one of the key things is also the accessibility that the talent in India has, right? In terms of, the internet, and everything is just so accessible for the skill development and everything. Unlike back in the days when I told my son that I actually paid money to learn MS Paint and MS Word, he laughed at me, but those were some of the days as well. But just sticking on to the point in terms of, you brought an important point about bias. I mean, we're hearing about hallucinations and everything. I think what's really important is how do we put all of this into, in an ethical usage of the technology? I think Srinivas and Vineet have alluded a lot in terms of how technology itself can be used for the betterment of the humanity. But what is also important is, while Gen AI and its potential has been really spoken about, how do we sort of put all of that into ethical usage? what does it take to sort of, is it a consortium? Is it the industries coming together to sort of have, a documented process of how we can, and there's a lot going on in deep fake. I don't need to really talk about it, but yes, so that's one of the key things.
There are multiple initiatives going on across the world, right? For example, if you look at this entire concept of responsible AI, right, which is picking up, and every single model which we build in our lab, be it the large language models, be it any of the traditional AI models, we ensure that we have responsible AI built in, right? Which means that there are mechanisms to identify not just the bias in the data, but also bias in the algorithm, identify when the data is changing, when the logic is changing, when the concepts are changing, identify the drift in any of them, and put this entire process repeatedly. Most importantly, we also need to bring in elements of explainability and interpretability of the decisions of the algorithm, because the algorithms can take various decisions. It's important for the decision maker to trust the algorithm, right? This is where the element of explainability and interpretability comes into place, where the decision maker should know why he or she is taking a decision based on a recommendation. And that is possible only if we have these checks and balances in place. And industry is doing a lot of initiatives on this front, particularly. In addition, you can see a lot of government interventions, particularly if you look at the European Union. They have a wonderful framework where they have classified various types of AI algorithms as low risk, medium risk, and high risk, right? And they have various categorization. I would encourage you to look at the European Union recommendations, where they actually have classified not just the business use for which the algorithms are being used, but also when you should not be using some of this for decision making. Like, for example, face recognition. I don't know how many of you saw that the camera which we put in when NASSCOM took our pictures. I don't know why NASSCOM need to take anybody's picture for registration, right? So what happens to this data which goes in at the back end, right? So things like that. Why do we need a certain PII data to be captured? For what purpose it is being used? What happens to this data at the back end, right? So these are checks and balances we need to put in place, not just at the company level, but also at the organization, at the country level, and various consortia needs to play a very active role in ensuring that this is not needed, right? Some of these things are just, just an additional step somebody put in as a process, but not just needed.
Great, thank you so much. Vineet, did you have a point of view on this one as well, in terms of ethical usage or the...
Absolutely, I agree what Jay mentioned. I think this is a big topic, and now with the new rules coming in, a lot of things which are happening, how do we use that responsibly? And that responsibility, one is our governments, our European unions or others giving it, but somewhere as a conscious also need to bring in, especially in the organization context. So sometimes you see when we look at employee data in an organization, our employees may think, oh, HR is gonna take care of that, right? So I don't need to worry. There are data related to my IT systems, IT is gonna take care of that. So if there is something which others are taking care, where am I playing that role? So that awareness and education, which is important, and I think that's a constant one, because we discuss it's changing ever. So how do we bring that element of education and awareness? I think that's also what I feel is a very important aspect.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Vineet. I think, I don't know, we just have about 5 minutes. I'll probably just shoot my last question to you, Srinivas. One of the key things, that inhibits the whole transformation piece itself is the resistance to change. And especially when you have multiple departments in the organization, bringing them and making them work towards a common goal or a vision is not an easy feat, right? Given that, any best practices that you would like to highlight that, companies can put into place to achieve their transformation goals?
Sure. I'll make it more inwardly focused, what we are doing within the company, not what we're preaching the customers, right, in terms of resistance to change. So if you look at Happiest Minds, when we were formed in 2011, we were formed as a company which focused on emerging tech. And we continue to do that. But every year there's a challenge, right? There's new technologies coming in. So that also becomes a challenge on how can we really look at resistance to change and how can we empower our employees learning something new. So there is a very mature process that is there in the company. So our CTO is heavily involved in understanding upcoming technologies. And for example, Gen AI, right? Everybody, last year, nobody knew Gen AI, and today everybody is knowing GenAI, and many of our customers are already moving things to production in less than a year. So that's the pace at which technologies are changing. So we had formed a GenAI team about a year and a half ago, and today it's a very mature business unit, separately having a separate P&L in the organization. So that's one thing. Second thing is about mentoring within the organization. How do you really get to make your employees understand that they have to change and they have to understand newer technologies? So I'm a part of it too, and I keep giving my example. So I keep telling them, today I teach AI and I'm working on AI, but believe me, I'm a chartered accountant by qualification. And I'll tell you a secret. I studied BCom and CA because I did not get enough marks to get a merit seat for engineering. Otherwise, I would have been engineering as well. So that means you guys are much intelligent, brainy than me. So if I can do something different and learn AI and other emerging technologies, you guys can certainly do it better, right? So those are the kind of things that we do in the organization and make sure our employees understand the emerging tech and we move towards it. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, it was great, engaging conversations. Brilliant it was. So if I were to just summarize and, just conclude, all the key takeaways is that, the potential of technology is huge. It's here to stay. So you snooze, you lose. So, how can you just kind of be there and, be abreast of everything that's kind of happening? Secondly, I think skills is a very important thing. It's not just technology. It also takes skills also to come together. But given the fact that there are newer skills taking birth, how much of it are you investing in terms of learning and development? And finally, I think we can't ignore the fact that India is just playing a pivotal role and will continue to play a big role as a talent hub and innovation hub. With that, I think we have about a couple of minutes to take maybe one or two questions. But before that, thank you so much for taking the time out to really share some of the best practices and insights. It's been absolutely, I'm sure, audience have really taken some notes and key takeaways. Any questions from the audience?
Namratha, is it okay if I can add one small point here?
Absolutely, please go ahead.
And you talked about responsibility. So I feel I also, being into eye care industry, one responsibility I should make sure I deliver to it. I think we talked about a lot for whole day. We will be talking about digital technology, innovation. Excess of everything is bad. So what happens when you are in front of screens, I think the poor eyes gets the maximum. If we look around the room, many of us are already wearing glasses, or if not, I'm sure when you go home, you are having some stress in the eyes. So there is a small golden rule which is called 20-20-20. This rule is something which I would request you to hear me clearly, and please tell your kids as well in your family members. That will make sure if you practice that rule, you will not become an eye patient. So 20-20-20 means every 20 minutes, you have to look for 20 feet. Just look at anywhere you want 20 feet for 20 seconds. If you do this, again, I'll repeat, 20 feet, look for 20 feet away, every 20 minutes for 20 seconds. That will relax your eyes a lot, and you will hopefully delay your eye issues, eye diseases, especially the kids when they are looking at playing video games and doing all those things. So that's one request I'll have from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. Any questions? With that, we're just on time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Namratha.
Please give them a big round of applause once again, and I'd like to request Satish from NASSCOM to present a small token of appreciation to our speakers, Vineet, Dr. Jay, Srinivas, and we'd also like to thank Namratha for moderating that session. Thank you.